Carrillo.
Present.
Mr. Ploger.
Present.
Ms. Simulton.
Present.
Ms. Venmuth.
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll start with 6.1, student recognition.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Simulton. Item 6.1 is student recognitions. I'm going to ask the board to please join me to the left over here as we receive those who we are recognizing this evening.
This evening, the Board of Education is proud to acknowledge and recognize the award-winning efforts and accomplishments of our students, both in the classroom as well as those who participate in extracurricular and athletic sports during the spring season. Our first group of students to be recognized are students from Oswego East High School who competed at the Business Professionals of America National Conference. BPA has a strong history as a student organization that contributes to the preparation of global professionals through the advancement of leadership, citizenship, academic, and technical skills for students. Students, as we call your name, if you could come forward here, pick up your certificate, and then head over to be congratulated by our Board of Education and our Superintendent, Dr. Sparlin. Tyler Becker, Jr., National Merit Scholar in 7th place in Business Law and Ethics. Aaron Bathra, freshman, 7th place in Computer Animation Team. Jensen Coonrad, Jr., 1st place in Business Law and Ethics, 6th place Administrative Support Concept, 7th place Computer Animation Team, President's Volunteer Service Award with 250 hours, including a letter from the President, and the National Torch Award. They are coached by Ms. Stacy Sager and Bobby Comiskey. So congratulations. We'll ask you to stay for a photo.
Don't move. If there's any parents that want to take a picture, you can come up closer if you'd like to take a picture.
Congratulations to those students. The next group we're going to recognize this evening are from Oswego High School. They competed at the Skills USA State Leadership and Skills Conference. This is a conference that brings together more than 2,000 career and technical education students who compete hands-on in over 100 different trade, technical, and leadership fields. At this time, students, please come pick up your certificate and head over to be congratulated. Will Hatfield, Sr., 1st place, gold medal in Nationals qualified in restaurant services. Jack Wolcott, sophomore, 1st place, gold medal in National qualified in cabinet making. Daniel Overstreet, Jr., 2nd place, silver medal in cabinet making. Colin Barker, Sr., 3rd place, bronze medal in cabinet making. Caitlin Thilk, freshman, 3rd place, bronze medal in baking and pastry arts. Our Skills USA coaches are Kevin Patterman and Tom Dwyer. At this time, any building administrators present? Yep, head on over. We'll do a quick photo. Stay. Congratulations. Our next group of students are the boys and girls track and field athletes from Oswego High School and Oswego East High School. The following students competed at the Illinois High School Association State Championship and were named All-State Athletes. Students, as your name is called, please come forward to be congratulated by the Board of Education and Dr. Sparlin. Haley Soriaga, Jr. from Oswego East, 8th place in pole vault. Trelicia Booker, Senior from Oswego High School, 6th place in 400 meter. Alex Stoss, Senior from Oswego East, 8th place in 1600 meter. And Parker Nold, Senior from Oswego East, 4th place in 3200 meter. Any building administrators or coaches present, could you join us for the student photo, please? We'd like to acknowledge some additional students unable to attend tonight's meeting, but we would like to acknowledge their accomplishments. Lauren Sullivan, Jr. at Oswego High School, for being named the Vale's Graphic Designer of the Year. VAL stands for the Valley Education for Employment System and ensures that career and technical education programs and services are provided to regional youth throughout an integrated delivery system. Congratulate Lauren. And Kelly Killingham, Jr. from Oswego East, for placing first in the 14th Congressional High School Art Competition hosted by Congresswoman Lauren Underwood. Her piece is now displayed for 1 year in the U.S. Capitol at Washington, D.C. Now we have several staff members to acknowledge this evening. As your name is called, please pick up your certificate here and head on over for congratulations. We'd like to welcome Dave Jeffers, Brokaw Early Learning Center custodian. Mr. Dave, as he's known at Brokaw, finished 3rd place in the Cintas Custodian of the Year 2003 contest. He was nominated for consideration based on being a role model for the students at Brokaw, as well as for the amount of work he put in after Brokaw suffered a fire that destroyed one of its therapy rooms and severely impacted an inclusive classroom. Congratulations, Mr. Dave. Is Stephanie San Roman, Oswego High School band teacher. Stephanie has been named as one of 30 music teachers from across the country in the 2023 Music Teachers of Excellence by the Country Music Association CMA Foundation. This program recognizes educators who are having the greatest impact on their students using the power of music as an avenue for change. Congratulations, Stephanie. And Mr. Kevin Schoenbach, Oswego High School Associate Band Director. Kevin has been announced as one of 212 quarterfinalists for the Music Educator Award that's presented by the Recording Academy and Grammy Museum. A total of 212 quarterfinalists out of over 2,000 nominations from 197 cities were announced as quarterfinalists. Congratulations, Kevin. If there's any administrators that would like to join our faculty up front, we'll do one final photo. All right, let's give one final round of applause for all of our students and faculty here this evening. Congratulations.
Okay, item 7.1 is our monthly report of progress from our strategic plan and Vision 308. Presenting this evening on English learners is Renee Sartor.
A little louder. No, no.
Good evening.
There we go.
So tonight I'd like to talk briefly about the English Learner Department and how we've contributed to the Envision 308 goals for this year. So our goals for 2026, as we look forward to continuing with Envision 308, is to have a continuous, cohesive services for English learners from early childhood up to high school, and a plan for continual improvement and a way to monitor the effectiveness of the different programs for the English learners. So for this year, one of the indicators of success that we were looking at was to strengthen the core curriculum and instruction across the grade levels and monitor their effectiveness. So this year, core teams in dual language and English learner services worked on bridging instruction and programming from lower to the upper levels. There was extensive representation and input on the new language arts and social studies committees that includes the piloting of new materials by the dual language and English learner teachers. A second indicator was to develop common expectations and a way to monitor instruction of English learners in the various program models. So towards this goal, kindergarten through 8th grade English learner teachers refined common expectations for instruction and piloted intervention programs. At junior high, teachers piloted, and they'll expand to other schools, an EL strategies course, which is going to target language-specific goals for the students. And dual language teams developed specific look-fors for best practices and conducted walkthroughs. Another indicator of success was to implement a system of assessment that aligns with the goals of the EL programs, specifically monitoring both English and Spanish proficiency. Kindergarten through 8th grade English learner teachers piloted various assessments and provided feedback as we developed criteria for monitoring the progress of ELs during the year. And this work will continue over the summer. Dual language continues to refine the assessment practices, looking at available resources, taking into consideration the adoption of a new language arts curriculum at elementary and junior high. And students in 5th and 8th grade dual language participated in Spanish language proficiency testing this spring. So this year also, we continued professional development for administrators and staff of both special education and English learners preschool through 12th grade. We looked at the problem solving for English learners, including how to differentiate instruction and provide interventions. The English learner and special education departments have shared expertise with staff and administrators throughout the year to enhance the knowledge of best practices and problem solving for those duly identified students. A final indicator we had for this year was to continue to tailor professional development of the district initiatives, such as the literacy and math frameworks and the new K through 8 language arts and social studies curriculum for the teachers of dual language and English learners. So during the school year for this, during school improvement days and teacher institute days, we held specific sessions for those teachers, and we offered choice boards of professional development activities to English learner and dual language teachers. Looking towards next year, our indicators of success that we want to look towards implementing would be to expand professional development on the intersection between English learners and special education to include additional administrators and special education groups and English learner staff from early childhood through high school. We will refine and expand the systems to monitor instruction for English learners and dual language learners through the implementation of common instructional expectations, assessments, observations, and walkthroughs. We'll continue to provide professional development choices that are tailored to English learners and dual language administrators and staff. And lastly, we'll monitor the growth in the dual language program to determine if additional space or resources are needed. Our work in the district that we do in the English Learner Department connects to the overall district work in the area of finance. We utilize Title III grant funds to provide supplemental materials, programs, and services to the students and families of English learners. Our contribution to student learning is that students improve their overall academic performance through developing their English language proficiency, and some do this while also developing Spanish language proficiency. Additionally, our work supports the language acquisition of students to make the academic content comprehensible to them within the framework set forth by the district and the other level departments. We assist in community partnerships by bridging the cultural, linguistic, and knowledge gaps that exist between our multilingual families and the community partners. We also work with the district departments and schools in partnership with the Bilingual Parent Advisory Committee. So those have been the contributions this year from the English Learner Department.
Thank you so much for that report, Renee. Board, do you have any questions in regards to the English Learners Annual Report?
No, go ahead.
You go first.
No, I'll admit this was just crazy, and I'm sorry I didn't get this in advance. But it's not really too much of a question, but I see that there's about 2,200 English learners coming in for 2023, representing, about 13% of our population. And then if you add former EL students, we're probably looking at a good quarter of our population were at some point English learners. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's something that the community should know, and this is something that we need to keep an eye on and do better for our students. So.
No.
Okay. Thank you for all the information, great information, lots of great work happening. I have one question and then just one comment that is for everyone. So my first question is, I noticed in the report that there was a jump in students exiting the program year over year from 4% to 8%. Where is that in the trend? Is that typical? Is 8% more usually the trend? Is 4%, or kind of or is it somewhere else?
Mm-hmm. I would say 8% is closer to the trend.
Okay.
So that drop, and that's been since I've been here, we're 2 years of COVID where not every student even took the test or attended school regularly or were remote or not remote. So that's why you see that higher amount of students that have exited.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. My other comment, this is mostly to my fellow board members, is that I was reviewing the plan, I was reviewing the updates and the presentations prior to the board meeting. And one thing that kept happening to me was I was like, oh, but did it work? Did it have an impact? Was it effective? And so I don't know if this is something we can decide as a board so that we can give direction to our administration. But for example, I was thinking, what is the way that you monitor, what is the way that you monitor effectiveness? Because you talk about monitoring effectiveness. What was the outcome of the piloted intervention? I don't know exactly what that was. What was the result of the walkthroughs? Was the PD effective? And how do you know if that PD was effective? So I think there's some direction we give to our administration so that they might be able to give us some other more tangible kind of outcomes of what the impact of all the great work that is happening. I think that would speak to that work, and then also give us an opportunity to, give you feedback on what on current practices and what we might look to in the future.
Certainly.
So, thank you.
And I think one of the things that we were talking about potentially is making sure that directions are clear as we're leaving the board meeting, that there's no confusion. So I agree.
Yeah, I'm not asking for those things. I'm just speaking as a comment. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Well, no, but okay. So if we were asking for those things, I would say
I'm not asking for those things. Okay. It's just a comment.
Ted,
Go ahead, Jared.
I had 3 quick questions. So I noticed that the K through 12, or K through 2 had larger numbers, and I know that's because we're waiting for them to exit access. So I'm not surprised they're larger numbers, but I noticed that they are larger numbers and they're very significant. So my question is this also a reflection of the increase in EL students that we have moving into the district?
Yeah, definitely. So, right, as students enter, as kindergarten, first, second grade students at those younger grades, it does take several years for them to exit out of the process. So as students more and more are entering, you'll see that cluster in the lower grade levels, so.
My second question is, I get this question all the time, so I apologize, but I'm going to ask it just because I field it a lot. Do you have any kind of like minimum, like, hey, we need to have this discussion about potentially another language in the district that could fit under dual language? Is there a minimum threshold where we would start to have that discussion?
Yeah, and to that I would say it's not so much a number of students, it's several factors. First of all, if we're looking at another language, let's say Russian, just to throw out a language, we would look at what are the trends of the students coming in. Are we seeing that that's a trend that's going to increase and keep growing, not that it's a 1 or 2 year influx, let's say. Also, we would want to see that there's at least, let's say, 20 students at one particular grade level, at those lower grade levels, to begin thinking of actual dual language as opposed to just having bilingual assistance for the students.
And I'm assuming that would be per school, right? 20 per, like, in a school, like, you wouldn't want to, like, if I had 1 at Homestead and 3 at Hunt Club and 4 at Long Beach.
And again, yeah, I'm talking very minimum. Hopefully, yeah, we would look at where are they clustered. Again, if they're spread out thin and there's, not a lot of students at different buildings, because that's a whole, so there's a lot to consider besides just the actual numbers, so.
Last one, I promise. Where are we at with DL at junior high when it comes to collaboration for staff and curriculum development? We get a lot of feedback when it comes to junior high and where we're at with DL.
So this year we've had our ELDL coordinator who works there, and she's been working with the staff at the junior high as both a coach and a mentor, and to also help them bridge and work with the curriculum that they have and bring those strategies to their classrooms. We also work with our English learner TOSA that assists with bringing the curriculum and helping it be developed at the junior high level as well as in the elementary. Also, the dual language English learner coordinator at the junior high has worked closely with our dual language core team and is looking at the same set of criteria to use as best practices that they're using at the elementary to be able to bridge those same practices to the junior high, and working on those same criteria for walkthroughs and observations and using how they can monitor the program at junior high.
And I don't expect an answer to this question, more of a comment, but one thing that, as we talk about inclusion, I hope, and I'm sure we are, but I hope that we're also checking in with those teachers at the junior high to make sure that they're feeling like the culture is welcoming and they have staff and they're not isolated. So, and thank you for answering my questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I was just going to explain that TOSA is Teacher on Special Assignment. We try not to put acronyms out and not explain them.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
That one I knew.
It's okay, I didn't.
I didn't know exactly what I meant, but I knew the essence.
Okay, we'll move on to 8.1, public comment. So on behalf of the Board of Education, I would like to thank the public for attending tonight's meeting. We value the feedback we receive from our residents and encourage everyone to take an active interest in their public school system. Residents interested in speaking to the Board of Education this evening are asked to have completed a comment card and presented it to the secretary to the board. When the secretary calls your name, I ask that you come to the microphone, state your name for the public record, and provide your feedback. Please note that comments are limited to 5 minutes per person and that no discussion of personnel matters or responses to questions are permitted. The board does not participate in discussions during public comment. Follow-up to your questions or concerns will be addressed by administration through the contact information provided on the comment card. Thank you.
Lisa Haronda. I'm not sure I said this name right. You're going to read it, right? At the end?
Hi, thank you. And I'm Lisa Rhoda. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. This is in response to the presentation on January 23rd, 2023, regarding the plans for social emotional learning for Community Unit School District 308 presented by Dr. Paul and Dr. Kincaid. Thank you for the time and effort put into this plan. We especially appreciated how students' voices were implemented. It sounds like 308 is headed in a good direction. It was asked how eating disorders was addressed in the nutrition curriculum at the high school level following that presentation. The response given that the committee did not address eating disorders for this presentation, but student services at the high schools will be contacted is what brings me here today, to share why it is important and how it does impact the educational environment. The honest answer was appreciated. It shows where we are now and where we must be vigilant to achieve. Since some time had lapsed between the presentation and today, what were the findings when eating disorders was addressed with student services? You may have found, as evidence shows, that contacting student services at the high school levels is a starting point, but more must be done. Conversations and training must be had in all grade levels and among all staff. They play a critical role in supporting the needs of individuals affected with eating disorders, including the language we use and the information presented. In order to truly address social emotional learning, health needs, nutrition, and fitness, we must work in collaboration with registered dietitians specializing in eating disorders. To bring eating disorders awareness into the conversation at all levels, and also have evidence-based body image curriculum to ensure that we are helping kids. This vicious disease is prevalent among all genders, ability levels, athletic abilities, age, socioeconomic status, and race. Over 28.8 people in America will experience an eating disorder, which equals about 1 in 9 individuals. According to the National Alliance for Eating Disorders, 70% of people living with eating disorders do not receive treatment. Despite the statistics, hospitalizations for individuals living with eating disorders has more than doubled since the COVID-19 pandemic. And good treatment is expensive and often comes with a distance, but it does not compare what can happen without treatment. According to the National Alliance for eating disorders has the second highest mortality rate, second only to opioid use disorder. Every 52 minutes in the United States, someone will lose their life due to an eating disorder. Studies have shown that eating disorders are prevalent among adolescents and kids starting as young as 5 to 6 years old. Given the severity of this disease, we must be careful in displaying stereotypical images of thin celebrities to portray what eating disorders look like. In fact, displaying these images for some challenges people who have eating disorders or who are susceptible to having one to use that image as a target and even strive for a slimmer figure. Having students use BMI calculators, having to enter their weight and track their caloric intake daily often produce inaccurate calculations of what a growing adolescent actually needs and do not take into account activity levels and information that is incorrectly entered. Additionally, lessons focusing on calorie counting, suggesting to lose 1 to 2 pounds a week if weight loss is desired, labeling food good or bad, only leads to rigid rules around food instead of teaching students to respect their bodies and to learn to have a healthy relationship around food, exercise, and to learn balance for life. This is where it's critical for registered dietitians to be involved in how schools teach nutrition and weight management. Although the intent is good, the current practices have significant data to prove that they are ineffective and even harmful. So yes, please do continue to speak with student services at the high school level. To say that they are an incredible team is an understatement. Please continue the conversation at all grade levels and within the community. Please ensure that they are equipped with the tools and training needed. Although schools may not have the magic cure, we can have important conversations with individuals trained in the field to ensure that we are providing the most accurate, evidence-based information for all to be healthy. No one should ever have to go through an eating disorder. Those who are affected by an eating disorder need to know that they are not alone and they deserve the right information and support. If you or someone you know are experiencing eating disorders, please reach out until someone helps you. There is help and hope, and you are worth it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Lindsay Robertson.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Robertson. Thank you so much for having me here. I was previously a dedicated substitute for Fox Chase in 21-22 and then a TA for Fox Chase in 22-23. My daughter Charlie is 7 and currently attends Churchill in the CrossCap program. In 22, the district made the decision to combine LSP and ISP programs, moving the children at Fox Chase to Churchill and vice versa. The plan was to have K through 3rd at Fox Chase and 4th through 5th at Churchill. The plan was allegedly not discussed with board members. It wasn't discussed with parents or teachers prior to a decision being made and was made based on data pre-COVID. The children, like my daughter, who had already formed friend groups with general education children, were ripped from those friendships and forced to start over. Those children were forced to make new friends with new teachers and staff and will then be forced to start all over again. My daughter alone will move 3 times in her elementary career if the plan stays. It's hard enough for typical general education children to transition to new schools and make friends, let alone special education kids. Please think about how hard that transition is on a special education child. Please think about the message you're sending to that child. It says the district doesn't care about my needs or my feelings of belonging and a sense of inclusion. The district does not care how this affects me as a person and student. Per the IDEA, location and placement are different. Special education children should be included in the general education or general enrollment numbers. They should not have to move schools around the general population because they are part of the general population. Simply put, this is discrimination. Now those same district officials have made the decision, again allegedly without the board's input or the input from parents, staff, or teachers in the schools affected to involuntarily reallocate teachers' assistants, many of whom have had to resign because it's not financially feasible or because they applied to work at certain schools based on the application descriptions, which conveniently leave out the information about the possibility of having to move. This involuntary reallocation, which is in breach of the union contract section that states voluntary transfers must be asked first before involuntary transfers are notified, leaves the district short-staffed, especially the special education department. Where there are usually multiple TAs per classroom, there will now be less. My daughter had a choking incident this year, and had there not been the amount of support there was in her classroom, it could have been fatal. While certain district officials have been trying to make special education students more independent, this is actually unhealthy and damaging. What happens when district officials are focused on fading supports, denying more one-on-ones, and not employing enough TAs? This often leads to bad outcomes for our students. It predetermines what is going to happen prior to the support being put in place. The adults are too focused on fading those supports rather than helping the child. We are so focused on an arbitrary timeline created by officials instead of letting what the child needs dictate the program. There is too much focus on independence rather than on building a child's sense of autonomy. These decisions say that our special education children are thought of last and aren't a priority to the district, which is disheartening. Why is our motto, "Together we empower, support, and motivate our students to thrive along with their unique educational journey," when we're not practicing it? I'm imploring the district to think about our special education kids. There is currently a petition for change, along with several cases where districts who tried similar plans lost. One here in Chicago was ruled in favor of the parents by the 7th Circuit because they knew the importance of adequately including our special education kids. Behind every child with a diagnosis who got what they needed despite the system working against them is a parent who spent countless hours researching, advocating, and finding other options. When the system fails us, we have to become the system. Currently, the parents are that system, and we shouldn't have to be. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you, Jared, for sincerely responding to my email. I really appreciate the time you took to listen to a parent and former employee of the district. It's what the community needs more of from our board members and district officials.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Snyder.
Hello, board members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to formally address you. My name is Jennifer, and up until May 26th, I was the lead lunch lady at Old Post. I was removed from the school as a result of getting involved in school matters. I'm not ashamed to tell you that I called 911 because of a student having a violent outburst. My son's class had been dealing with these violent outbursts all year, and I finally had enough. Upon evacuating, the teacher sent my son to me, and his friends followed. They showed up crying, visibly upset, and one of them had been injured. These outbursts were always violent, and the students were always a witness to this, and often injured before the class could be evacuated. I watched my son become a very angry, resentful, and fearful child. We put him in therapy to help him cope. He has been traumatized. That may seem like an exaggeration, but I promise it is not. When that student comes up in conversation, my son becomes angry and chokes back tears. By nature, my kid rarely cries. That's what these outbursts have done to him. Prior to this incident, we spoke to Mike Mitchinson and Michael Swanson. They insisted they were working on it. They promised us that the well-being of their students was their top priority. We asked that our son be moved to another class. That was ignored. We asked that the student be monitored at all times. That was ignored. Mike Mitchinson offered to build a relationship with our son as a way to help him cope. Would you like to know how many times Mike met up with our son to engage in creating that bond? 0. In January, the same student experiencing these challenges walked away from recess, and the school didn't notice. The student walked to Fruitful Yield, where he asked someone to call his mom. When his mom called the school to ask where her son was, she was told that they were just about to call her. Read between those lines. They had no idea where her child was. They were frantically doing what they needed to do to cover their own butts, and they were definitely not just about to call her. Nobody in my son's class thrived this year. Not the student struggling, not their classmates, and not their teacher who took time off in order to protect her own mental health. Their class finished the year behind the other classes as a result of losing so much instruction time. Old Post completely failed them. I've done my research. I know that little can be done because the children experiencing these struggles are protected by IDEA. Until policies change, schools across the U.S. are stuck experiencing the same. However, other districts are trying. The administration is being supportive and proactive. The students at Old Post do not have that, regardless of what you're being told. Districts have enacted policies that require the schools to document every evacuation and loss of instruction time for all students. Further, the schools require the principal to communicate evacuations to the parents within 24 hours. These are steps forward and the minimum that parents deserve. I urge the board to come together to work on this issue and consider requiring the same documentation and communication. I loved my job. I prided myself on building strong bonds with the students. I am devastated that I will not be there next year, as I grew to care about them greatly. I would have jumped to help any of them without hesitation. I cannot fathom an administrator not doing the same. Students saw me as a safe space and someone that was there to protect them. They did not see this in Mike Mitchinson or Michael Swanson. I was sternly told by them that I scared the students that fateful morning. I asked my son if he felt scared when he saw the cops show up. He said no. I felt relieved that someone was finally going to protect us. Granted, there were many other students at the school that may have felt differently, but to the students that were already scared and had been scared so many times before, they saw safety. I hope that you begin to discuss doing more to help all students cope with these incidents as they are becoming common. All students deserve to be safe in school. We have to acknowledge that there is a problem and that we must make changes in order to do right by our students. I want you to know that I loved my job and those kids so much. I was the best damn lunch lady, and those kids would agree. I've cried a lot, but my kids' safety comes first. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have one last public comment from a student. Sophie Itakar, that's her name. She states, the state of the bathrooms and locker rooms is an issue for many students, including myself. And she says they're worried about it. Many are saying that the locker rooms are very messy in both the boys' and the girls' rooms. A lot of students have previously said that the lockers and the stall doors can't fully close due to not being well maintained. Due to this, many feel uncomfortable due to the lack of privacy. People who change in the coach's locker room complain that it is very dirty, even saying there is an unhealthy amount of bugs, mainly ants. In fact, many of the bathrooms are unhygienic. There is an issue because of how unhygienic the bathrooms and locker rooms are. It can result in the spreading of diseases and viruses such as E. coli, influenza, the common cold, etc. There is also a problem with people smoking, vaping in the bathrooms. People going to the bathrooms to smoke and or vape is also an issue because it can release harmful vapors which can make the bathrooms difficult to breathe in. Also, if students see other students smoking and vaping, they may start to vape as well. Unfortunately, there isn't much we can do about the smoking vaping issue other than trying to discourage smoking and vaping and maybe implementing smoke alarms. However, there are many ways to take care of the other issues with the school bathrooms. For example, we can use some of the school's budget to fix the doors and lockers, as well as implementing more things to improve the cleanliness of the bathrooms and locker rooms. One thing we can do is to have exterminators come in to get rid of the bugs. We could also have the bathrooms cleaned by janitors on a daily basis. We should also try to fix or get new lockers and bathroom stalls. Thank you for your time. Sophia Ithakar. Okay, we'll move on to 9.1, Superintendent Report.
Well, good evening, Board. It's good to see you, everyone. Tonight is my final board meeting as your superintendent, and the phrase that the older we get, time seems to move faster, or time goes by fast when you're having fun. I have certainly found to be true. I've had the opportunity to say our see you laters at the when I was honored at the retirement dinner on May 27th. I appreciate all the kind words that everyone said about me. It was something that was very appreciated, and something I know all of our retirees will truly cherish. So I've sincerely enjoyed the past 11 years in 308. I will carry the memories and those friendships with me forever. I look forward to meeting my successor, and I wish you all the very best. And Mrs. Simulton, that is my final report.
Can I just say thank you? You know, I was here when you were when you were hired on for the first time, and here I am again. And so I just wanted to say thank you for all your dedication to our school district. It's been greatly appreciated, and I've appreciated all the conversations and my learning over the years. So thank you.
Thank you, Jared. I appreciate it. It has been a wonderful journey.
Okay, 9.2, student ambassador reports.
All right, so also echoing that, thanks. Thank you, Dr. Sparlin, for everything you've done for us. So in the last few weeks of school, the SSAC met a few times to disaggregate data. We focused mostly on staff-student interactions and student-student interactions. We all agreed that us as students additionally need to take accountability for our successes, but also our failures. And we recognize that there is a generational gap between us as students and teachers and other administration. We talked about respect and how we can go about receiving help and asking for that help. One of the big things that we also talked about was implicit bias and where we can see that in our schools. And I'd like to share with you just a few of the major ones we found. Those were favoritism. A lot of people witnessed that it happened but couldn't name specific ones. Microaggressions, genders treated differently, not understanding cultural backgrounds, and teachers discouraging students from challenging classwork and other courses. So those were some of the big pieces of data that we found, and next school year we hope to look into them more.
Yeah, and just building off of the staff-student interaction piece, the SSAC also looked a lot into why there's the relationship gaps as well between students and teachers. A lot of that comes with confidence that students have with their teachers, and that can come from a variety of things, whether that be cultural, how they're raised, maybe just their own environmental factors or their own self-image. But it's also a big problem because it talks a little bit about how students feel these relationships impact their academics. Several students know that there are things like tone, the way teachers talk to you, the effort they put in to talk to you, the way they look at you or where you're seated in the classroom. Those are the things that determine if a teacher likes you. And oftentimes those things can determine if you'll do well in a class or not, because oftentimes those implicit bias factors come in and suddenly you're not being treated the same as another student. This can impair one's learning in the classroom, the effort they put into the classroom, or their learning in general. A couple of things that we wanted to focus on next year action-wise, because we spent a lot of this school year doing a lot of research and pushing out surveys, is doing one-on-one dialogues with teachers and students. We've done our fair share of surveys and we want to get some more personal feedback as of now. We want to use evaluation tools early in the year, probably 2 to 3 weeks in the first semester, on how students feel the course is going for them. The SSAC and several students outside of it noted that we do get course evaluations at the end of the year, and by the time that happens, no improvements can be made to your own learning. And you can't verify if it's being implemented in the next year because you would have already passed out of the course. By putting in or mandating evaluations throughout the year, these improvements are seen by the students and change has to be made. Getting to know students' learning cycles and having consistency about things like late policies, homework, these are the things that can build a structured environment. The action for the fall that we want to take, the most important one, is building a survey for the teachers. And this gets a little bit tricky, but the biggest reason we wanted to do this is because we've gotten a lot of insight from students about how they feel they have to build these relationships in order to succeed. They feel forced to try to get on the good side of the teacher in order to get an A in the class. And this shouldn't be required. You're receiving education, and the effort you put in should be how well you engage in the classroom, not getting on a teacher's good side. But at the same time, we've never gotten the teacher's perspective on how they feel about the students, how their judgment about a student is impaired by what other teachers say about a student in particular, and we wanted to look into that. A couple of the questions we wanted to ask is, how do you build a supportive environment for all of your students? Not why, or if they do, because they'll all say, like, of course we do, and then we'll never know how they do it. What prevents you from being vulnerable with students? Communication from students to teachers and vice versa has been a really big aspect of this year. How does your narrative impact your ability to have relationships with students who have a different narrative than you, whether that be ethnic, racial, cultural, religious, or otherwise? We definitely wanted to touch into these things in order to bridge some of those gaps that seem a little bit spread apart right now. That was a lot of talking. But I guess those are a couple of the things that we wanted to work on for next year, action-based with all of the research that we've accumulated over the past year.
Thank you very much.
I love the evolution. Yeah.
Beautiful.
What a capstone, yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So 9.3, board committee reports. We have a policy report and a legislative report. And those reports have been posted to board docs. Do our board members have any questions for those two committees?
I mean, I do have a policy question, but I think I'll wait until we make the motion to talk about it later, so.
Okay. We'll move on then to 9.4, board member comments. And our vice president is going to speak on behalf of the board for comments for Dr. Sparlin.
So, as Dr. Sparlin just mentioned, this is his last meeting, and I know we had a chance to express our gratitude at the retirement celebration, but I thought it was apropos for us to appreciate you publicly. And so, Dr. Sparlin, you really spent decades serving the students and staff with compassion. Your love for students and your commitment to staff is evident in every single interaction. You have led SD308 during times of uncertainty, and it was your passion for people that gave so many the reassurance of what was possible. Your tireless efforts, your long days and nights, and your thoughtful gestures of appreciation let others know just how much you cared, not just about their success, but their well-being. Your support for students expanded beyond the classroom, especially due to your love for sports. You have served SD308 in a variety of roles and with many hats, all with the purpose of empowering, supporting, motivating all students to thrive along their unique educational journeys. Dr. Sparlin, thank you for your decades of servant leadership. And on behalf of the entire Community Unit School District 308, we wish you well in your next chapter. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Gatewood. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else with board comments for tonight? All right, we'll move on to 10.1, the consent agenda. Are there any questions on the consent agenda? If not, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
Make a motion to approve all items under consent, including 8.1 minutes from the May 8, 2023 Board of Education meeting, open and closed session, minutes from the May 22nd, 2023 special closed Board of Education meeting, 8.2 to acknowledge the FOIA. Hold on a second. Let me start over because it says 10. Sorry. Scratch that. I make a motion to approve all items under consent, including 10.1 minutes from the May 8, 2023 Board of Education meeting, open and closed session, minutes from the May 22nd, 2023 special closed Board of Education meeting, 10.2 to acknowledge the FOIA requests received by the district, and 10.3 to acknowledge the gifts and/or donations received by the district.
Second.
Real quick, I do have a comment on the 10.3, since motion has been seconded. I just want to take a moment to say thank you to the businesses in the community that support our schools in the ways that are highlighted in 10.3. I hope people look at the list, and I hope they support our partners who help our schools.
Dr. Maria,
Aye.
Ms. Van Mes,
Aye.
Mr. Cerrone,
Aye.
Ms. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson, Mr. Ploger.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Item 11.1 is information on financial statements. Does the board have any questions on what we've presented this evening? Item 11.2 is information from conversations held with the school day committee. Mrs. Dahlquist will present what the committee came up with.
Thank you. School Day Committee has done an incredible amount of work, and it is not finished. Most of the work will be still continuing when we meet back. In fact, we felt it was so important that we already have a date on the books for September 12th. But this highly committed group of people met frequently this year. Some of this work had been going on 3-4 years ago as we attempted to do some of these things. For quite some time, there has been interest in trying to find out a way to have our elementary school day end earlier, especially in the winter months. Our students go home in the dark, and our teachers report that the end of the day is very tiring for a lot of our students. So that was something that we looked at. We also tried to address the long lunch periods at junior high. Those of you who have ever supervised a junior high lunchroom, you know that a lot of additional downtime is sometimes not a great thing. So that is something that we tried to look at. And then we also tried to look at how a later start might affect high school students and looked at some of the brain research there. I wish I could tell you that we were super successful, but it was a very difficult job. For those of you who don't know, most of our buses run 3 routes. They do a high school route and a junior high and an elementary. And because we use the same bus drivers to do that, you have to have enough time to drop off students, go back out into the community, pick up kids, come back to the next level of school, those pieces. And really takes about 40 to 50 minutes of time in between arrival and 40 minutes at dismissal. It's a little bit faster at that time. So we redid, no exaggeration, probably close to 50 different iterations of schedule changes. If all levels could go at 8 o'clock, we would be done. That is the prime time that every single level would like. But as I said, you've got to have a level before that and a level after that. And there wasn't easily found a way to meet all of those pieces. So as we went through and talked about all the different ways that we might do this, we only came up with one acceptable piece, which is a very slight, small schedule change for the proposal for next year. So right now, as it stands, and we went back and forth, we did staff surveys to everyone. Our union leadership was really helpful in all of this, is to leave high school alone with student and staff day being the same. Shorten the junior high student day by 5 minutes, and that's to decrease all passing periods. And you might say, well, Faith, we have more than 5 passing periods. Why wouldn't it be shorter than that? We are going to then give those other 3 minutes back to student support time, which our administrators are really excited about that. And then that leaves that we have a 5-minute shorter day to then be able to shorten elementary day by 5 minutes. But I want to point out to everyone that the teacher day would not be changing at all. So our elementaries right now, there's no one to supervise students right away, so students come in, but you can imagine in kindergarten in November when they come in with their snowsuits and their mittens and all those things, it takes a while to get instruction going. So by having our teachers available earlier than that, we'll actually be letting in students and be able to start instruction a few minutes earlier. Again, a whole lot of work for not a whole lot of change, but we would be then coming back to the board for this proposal in July, but then continuing the work on what we need to do next year. There's still a great interest in shortening junior high lunch and figuring out how to do that. And with the current contractual supervisions, the administration did not see how to do that right away. We do have a junior high that's going to be piloting some things, so hopefully we'll have some more ideas on what to do with that. And then we would still really love to be able to figure out a way to have elementary start. We looked at flipping different levels, but could not come to consensus on that.
So there's a lot of studies out there that show that high school should start later. So obviously with that, there wasn't a lot of give on
There is, high school, I think, would be overjoyed at starting at the 7:45 or 8 o'clock time. Then you would need to have elementary start that much earlier or have junior high start that much earlier. And looking at whether we would want elementary to start at 7:15 or 7:10 in the morning, and what those pieces look like. We also thought when we looked at whether we could change high school, there are some things that if we started that work early in the fall that would impact athletics, would impact other of those things, that by February and March, some of that motion for the next school year for some of those after-school competitions was already in motion. So that's why we're starting earlier.
On the committee members, is transportation represented on here? I don't know who all.
They weren't a regular as a committee member, but I was on the phone a lot with Mike DeArmond, and we wrote different schedules and looked at different ways to do that. So he was on consult a lot.
I think it's incredibly important to have all the people that the changes affect in the room and make sure that everybody's represented there. And I just want to put an exclamation point on what Mrs. Simulton said. There's so much research out there for both high school students and elementary students, and the sports thing is a whole nother animal in and of itself, but I do hope that we dig into that because it affects outcomes and achievement. So I look forward to the next iteration of what this looks like.
Do we have supports in mind for junior high, or some? I know you said there's a pilot, but is there just something to give them? Because 41 minutes I don't even need 41 minutes to eat lunch, and
right.
I mean I've seen my two boys when they were in junior high. It does not take them 41 minutes to eat. I don't care how much food I put in front of them. It's going to take them 41 minutes to eat that food. So I'm just curious, like, is there something?
And that is one of the things that Shannon Luders and I have been looking through as we look at contractual language and those pieces. What are some of our supervisions and how we can support and have more staff there? And we're optimistic that with what we're planning in the fall, we'd be able to make more permanent changes.
And while I appreciate that, the one thing that I would say to that is, and I think it was to your point, right, that it's idle time. And so, listen, I'm happy that there's more staff there to help commiserate, if you will, for nothing else. But the real problem is it's idle time. And so I'm not saying I have a solution, but I mean, to me, that's the piece here is you're bringing in a huge amount of students, and
right.
Here you go, right? So I appreciate the work. I don't want to sound
sure.
non-appreciative. It's just,
and we agree with you that it needs to be addressed.
So this is me personally, but I don't know if anybody else would agree. But if we were to have ideal brain research-based start times, I would be interested to know what would the financial considerations be, because it seems like we're going off of zero financial considerations.
So if we were to run multiple buses or not have a bus driver do 3 routes and only have them do 2?
I don't know how that contractually works, but I would like to know so we can determine if that's something that needs to be prioritized.
We did entertain and have our Director of Transportation price out on what that would look like to try to have only 2, each of our bus drivers have approximately 2 routes. The price was quite sizable, but really why we rejected that is you would need that many more bus drivers to to do some of those pieces, and then they wouldn't have as much work to do because their hours would be even less than that.
I totally get that. So yeah, I could see how feasibility and, financial restraints, but, yeah, it's just something that I wouldn't mind just knowing more about.
Sure, and
It sounds like you already did some of that
yes,
research.
and I can send you the numbers, because we did look at that, at how costly or how practical it would be to entertain an idea like that.
Do we know of any large unit district that's pulled this off? And if so, do we know how they did it? I'm just curious.
To combine bus routes by levels,
To
I believe that.
figure out how to do, yeah, go ahead.
No.
To figure out how to send our students to school at the optimal times.
Sure,
So I don't know, I mean,
yeah,
if that's the only way to do it, sure,
Right.
but I mean, you know what I mean?
So obviously, districts that are K-8 or just high school, it's a lot
Yeah.
easier
Yeah, way
to do
easier.
that. But I believe, and I don't know if it's still this year, but I know in the past, Naperville 203 did decide to spend the money to have less routes and have like elementary and junior high at the same time, so that you would just have that many more pieces to do that. That was quite a sizable amount back when I was in the know on how much that was costing. There aren't a whole lot of K-12 districts that have done the flip of having elementary, start at those early pieces. We weren't aware of anybody locally that had done that switch that's K-12, but then we've worked the schedules. It's doable. It's just how palatable is it for the change and what the impact of either junior high or high school athletics is to be that much later.
I tend to agree with Dominic. I would at least like to see what it looks like. I think it's a great point, Dominic. And equally, I would like us to help with the education process of all of this, which is, hey, what do those districts look like that have been able to do it? 'Cause to your point, this is how Illinois is the unicorn, right? The K-8, the 9-12, and the unit districts. So what does that look like?
So are you wanting to see samples of the schedules that we made? Or just to see what other districts?
Well, I'm not going to speak. Dominic's going to be able to articulate what he wants more, but for me, on my end, to add to what he wants, I just want to know which large unit districts have pulled this off, because I think also understanding. Listen, let's look at their EBF rating, right? I mean, if they're funded above 100%, that tells us something right away. If that's who's pulling it off.
I have a feeling it's a large number because you probably have minimum hours, right? In the OTA, and then they're not working those hours. It's going to be sizable, but I still I'd be interested.
Okay.
But isn't there also an element of, we used to run less routes, and we did this before. So I understand there's a bus driver shortage on many levels. I understand it. But, do we see our contract that was ratified? Does that help? Are we going to see a trend in, having more bus drivers? I think we need to be prepared to do what is best for student outcomes, so that it might take us a year to do an exercise like this. So having that information in our pocket and able to understand what those implications are, are there grants we can go for? I know that seems to be what we always say. Is there a grant, that requires time and, admin with time to write those? I understand all that, but I think being able to be equipped with that information and understanding the different levers of the budget and how they can be changed is very helpful for the board to be able to make and help with those decisions.
Go ahead.
I didn't pose this, but I'm maybe having you take a trip down memory lane. Was there? I'm pretty sure there was a time when one of the big savings was to kind of go to the scheduling with the transportation, where it was. Was that something during your time, or?
I remember 3-tier routes the whole time I've been here.
3-tier routes the whole time.
Right.
I just remember there was something with consolidation, but maybe it wasn't that. Okay.
So is the board asking for a presentation on, what are we asking for? Because I want her to be clear when she walks away what it is that we want from her.
Well, can I ask one other
Mhm.
question in between? I assume you've looked at these already, but have you looked at doing something in between, like maybe flip high school and junior high?
We've looked at, starting with junior high and then going elementary and high, all the different orders.
All the different iterations.
We went through and took surveys back to all staff, all of those pieces.
I wouldn't mind just a report from from the committee in our Wednesday updates or whatever. After their third meeting or second meeting or whatever,
Of financial implications.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something.
To answer your question, and you can help me out here, Dr. Sparlin, I think what he's referring to, and I could be wrong, but I think what you're referring to with your point was, I think there was a time where we had students who were being bused who actually were within a certain amount, and we drew that back, if I remember correctly, right? Like, we had students who were within that walking threshold, and I think we kind of drew that back a bit, if I remember correctly.
Sometimes the reason for the transportation being provided within that 1.5 miles is due to certain construction
Yes,
that may be happening.
absolutely,
And then when that construction goes away, the transportation goes away as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that might be what you're referring to, because there were some reductions due to some.
A long time ago.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
And what I recall
You're probably right,
is
though.
there was a time where we had more bus stops, and we reduced the
Yes.
distance
That
between
too,
bus stops, so
that
we
too.
reduced the number of stops on routes.
And made kids walk to
A little bit
another
further,
bus stop.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I remember too.
That's a good one too. Yeah.
But with-
Not a good one, but you know what I mean.
With the exercise for financial implications, it would be helpful to have some data-based research behind if this was the scenario. If we were to flip high school and elementary, here's the financial implication, here's the data behind that, being driven towards what is best for student outcomes, and then the reality comes into play. We can or cannot afford that, but I think it's incredibly important to know what that looks like.
Yeah.
So as Faith said, she had like 50 iterations of what they went through. So I'm sure most of what you're asking for, she already has. So I'm sure she can put something together.
But it wasn't data-driven. It wasn't data-driven based on optimal start times and end times for
We
age.
did look into brain research around the high school piece, especially
Right.
of what time of day. Definitely brain research in your adolescent. 10 o'clock would be a wonderful time to start school as far as brain health.
Yeah.
But if you go that late into the day, that also affects students' ability to work, be part of athletics, do all of those.
But like
pieces.
7:15 to 10, there's like we could head towards the other way. But then elementary too, like, as an elementary parent, well, no longer, but kids being in school till almost 4 o'clock is.
There's not near as much extensive research on what the optimal time to end for elementary is, but definitely that peak time, 8 o'clock in the morning, again, is
Yep.
a really great start time as
Yep.
far as brain health for the elementary age child. And obviously, there's a wide difference between a kindergartner and a fifth grader.
Yes.
On where that piece is. But the committee did look into those pieces as well.
And I think you hinted at this, but the other piece that I probably would want to see in there is the reality or the realistic ability to recruit the staff that would be needed
Right,
in order
yeah, that's what I'm saying,
to
the
do that.
feasibility even,
Yeah,
yeah.
the labor market's tight.
This is a great committee, though.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate all the work that you and the committee did
Yeah.
because a lot of time and effort went into, like Faith said, a lot of time and effort went into this very small change, but I think it's laying some really great foundational work for what comes next.
Okay.
So I want to check in on the timing of that report, because the proposal right now is to come back, to our July board meeting to see about the 5-minute change. Are you wanting to see all of those pieces in a report?
No, I think we
before
can.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify.
But
Thank you. Yeah.
You got a lot going on.
is the 5 minutes worth the disruption?
So we had all of the administrators and the significant piece of almost all the committee members, our OEA members, and union membership, and we debated about that, because certainly our elementary staff that really were asking for this are like, 5 minutes, really? That wasn't, the piece of that. And we debated that quite a bit and decided that yes, that our elementary staff was asking for this so much and that we wanted to have less downtime at transition for junior high in between periods and can build some, that we decided that it was worth it. As we did talk about, really, we're going to go to a board report and to do all of these things for a 5-minute change, but that's where we landed.
No, yeah, I appreciate it. You brought us,
thanks for
brought
all
it,
the
brought it
work.
to the top of my mind. So yeah, so it was worth it for me. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, item 11.3 is an update in regards to the Montgomery request for a partial tax abatement. And Dr. Petsky is going to lead us through his presentation.
I brought a guest with me today. So I've got Brittany Thies from Whitlaw. So welcome, Brittany.
Hello, Brittany.
So, Brittany's been instrumental with working for me the last 2 years. She does a lot of property work, so a lot of tax work, works with me on the levy and a lot of financial projections. So I appreciate all the time and effort that she puts in working in the business office. And so now we have our Village of Montgomery Development Abatement Update. As you recall, I presented something back on April 11th. I just wanted to follow up with the board on where we are in that process. Also, if I could point out, we have an audience member. So Kate Coxworth, she's an industrial broker with JLL. So she's been working very closely with the developers, people interested in the property, as well as the Village of Montgomery, and putting some of these land incentives together. So nice to have you with us. All right, just for a little bit of project background, because it's been a little while. So especially for Amy and Mary Jo. So the Village of Montgomery's Economic Development Office has been working on a series of projects that include parcels of currently undeveloped land. I'll show you where that is in just a minute. So taxing bodies that have been invited to consider this abatement are the Village of Montgomery, the Waubonsie Community College, Kendall County, and the school district. And I'll talk about real quickly what an abatement is here in a few minutes. Basically, there's companies and developers who are seeking incentives to choose specific sites and property for their developments. So the property that we're talking about is, if you take Route 30 out to Orchard Road and down by Galena Road, kind of where the old Caterpillar plant was, there is some vacant land that you can see here. And there's a proposal to put some facilities in there. This is an industrial property development, which we haven't seen for a while. Usually we're looking at residential, so drive down Route 30 and you'll see a lot of houses and homes and residential. So this is industrial property proposals. So real quick, just to let you know again what a property tax abatement is. Property tax abatement is just a way to support and promote the expansion of existing businesses to a new location. And the incentive is, if they pay a property tax bill, we give them a portion of that property tax bill so they can use it to invest in the property development. So anything to add on to that one? Good. I did a really terrible job explaining that one last time. So property abatement. What I did want to show is that current property. We called the county office and got the parcel numbers that are looking at being developed. So here you can see the property acreage. You can see what their current assessed values are. And based on those EAVs, or the assessed values, the district received tax receipts on each one of those parcels. It comes out to about $6,443,000 per year is what we get in tax revenue. So I'll come back to that number in just a minute as we look at the investment and the property development. All right, so since April 11th, the Village of Montgomery has provided an estimated property tax analysis. So I'll share that with you tonight and just reiterate that that's an estimate, what the village has at this time. Kendall County has provided some comparable abatement agreements that were significantly shorter in time, as well as lower percentages. If you recall, for this abatement, they were asking for about a 10-year abatement and wanted to entertain the idea of a 75% abatement for 5 years and a 50% abatement for the last 5 years. So, and one of the things I think is important to point out here too, the agreements that we had, they're not only significantly shorter and lower percentages, but they were also a lower investment. So this is a much higher investment, $40 million versus $400 million. So also those agreements included some limitations on property tax challenges, what they call or refer to as a clawback. Kendall County Board voted to send their request to the Committee of the Whole. That was back in March, so about March 17th. They took action at the board level, gave it to the Committee of the Whole, and there's been no further public action on that. The Village of Montgomery did take action. They voted to negotiate an incentive agreement for 10 years with a property tax abatement of 75% for the first 5 years, and then a 50% abatement for the second 5 years. So again, if we collect $100 the first year, they're asking for $75 back to invest in the property and the business, or the last 5 years, they're asking for half of that back as well. And I'll point out, I do have a summary slide that Brittany and I were working on that will highlight what that abatement could look like. So that was the Village of Montgomery. Also, Waubonsie Community College held a meeting on May 17th with no further public comment. They did have some questions. They had some questions answered, but there was no other discussion after that. So this is a very tiny slide that basically shows this is the assessment data that the Village of Montgomery provided for us. And what it illustrates is across the top is every taxing body. And I think one of the reasons we're not seeing a lot of action from the other taxing bodies is their taxing rates are so much lower than ours. So for example, I can't even read it myself. You know, we've got the county at 0.6%, where the school district's at 6.3%. Oh, hey, thank you, technology people. Look at there, I can see. So much better. So across the top, you see all of the taxing bodies. So say the school district there, 6.3%, Oswego Fire, 0.6, the county, 0.6, the junior college, 0.4, Fox Valley Park District, 0.4. So one of the reasons we're not seeing a lot of action is because people are waiting to see the person who values the most from the property taxes, what are they going to do, or what are they willing to do. So scroll over to the left side again, and going down horizontally then, what we see are the two big blocks. There's a phase 1 at the top, and then below the line at the bottom, lot 2 is kind of the northern site, or a second phase. So at the top there, what you'll see is the land in question and what the EAV is on that. And then you see the building. So building A, phase 1, building B, phase 2, and the additional building. And I think it's important to point out here that the assessments we see, the value is only on the buildings. It doesn't include the value of the property and other things like that. So you can now see the average value per square foot. That data, again, was provided by the Village of Montgomery using some comparable development back from like 1994, 1998, when they saw those happening. So one of the questions the district has is that a current assessment, or are those values accurate? But based on what we've got here, you can see the average value per square foot. You can then see the estimated EAV, and then the years that those developments would be taking place. And then you can see, based on our tax rate and the new EAVs, how much tax dollars the district would receive. And the yellow line below that then is kind of showing, so that the one $504,000, if we were to abate 50% of that, it would be $252,000, or if we were to abate 75% of that, you can kind of see what those figures calculate at the bottom. So I think what I'll do is I'll flip to the summary page to kind of give you some highlights, but this is kind of the data that, that we use to make those calculations.
Do you mind if I
So-
go through a few?
Yeah, go ahead, Britt.
Dr. Pesky hit on a couple of assumptions that went into these.
Brittany, could you use the microphone, please? Thank you.
Dr. Petsky hit on a couple of the assumptions that went into these calculations. He took data from the village and took it to the next level just for comparisons. There are a couple of assumptions that you need to be aware of, not because we would suggest other assumptions. You have to have some factors to use to work from. You acknowledge the fact that the assessed value that's being used to calculate the abatement amount is based on averages. In the property tax arena, when we're looking at the assessed value of a property, it's supposed to be set at 1/3 of the fair market value. When township assessors and the Board of Review, Property Tax Appeal Board are setting the assessed value, they're looking at the cost approach, the income approach, and the sales comparison approach. So they would be adjusting for factors like age, size, location, like you alluded to with the age. Through this process, the district and the other taxing bodies are in a unique position to have more information about the cost of this particular project in a way that you wouldn't necessarily have access to that when you are at the property tax appeal or complaint stage. I caution when looking at these numbers, not because of any of the preparers of the spreadsheet, but just because there have been a number of transitions over the last couple of months that mean we've had different pieces coming from different parties. And I think we're still looking to narrow down what the district's estimates would be. These calculations assume the district continues to have a flat tax rate. So that's one of the factors when you're using a spreadsheet, you have to have inputs to use. We didn't artificially come up with something different. And like Dr. Pesky mentioned, the abatement is calculated on the building, the improvement alone, as opposed to the land value. You'll see in this spreadsheet that I believe it was upper 3 million, 3.1 million assessed value for the land. That is different than what you saw in that prior spreadsheet where the taxes were calculated for this property. We've also seen information that the land acquisition was in the $16 million range. So we're seeing it move in the right direction in these calculations, but there's still a lot of movement that could happen. And we just want to caution the board when looking at these numbers that it's for purposes of you having some numbers in front of you, but with those factors in mind.
So are there any additional, I'm sorry, I don't want to ask premature questions, but so based on this spreadsheet, are you saying that the numbers based on these assumptions can change, but are all of the assumptions listed within this spreadsheet and we just understand that the percentages or anything else, or it may shift based on this, but there's nothing missing on here for us to not consider?
The request from the village at this point and from the developer is for a 10-year abatement, the first 5 years at 75%, the second set of 5 years at 50%. There's some discussion of whether that 10 years is going to be a flat 10 years or whether it's going to be staggered. That is the certain component of what the request is. And for the board, Dr. Petsy will get into it, but whether you're prepared to state a position tonight, whether you need more information, the spreadsheet is one set of calculations of what that could mean for the district.
Got it.
Yeah, so kind of like Brittany said, it depends on the appraisal. Are they using the cost method? Are they using the income method, the sales method? How are they looking at that? And that would change some of the numbers here. So this is based on the cost method. Brittany and I worked a long time to take all that spreadsheet data and kind of come up with an easy potential summary of what this could look like. So this is probably the most important slide here that I want you to kind of see. So currently the district's annual tax receipts, as I said earlier, was $6,444 in undeveloped land. So over a 10-year period, we would be looking at getting $64,000. Well, the proposed tax receipts based on the Village Montgomery estimates that they provided over 10 years would increase that to $20 million, or an average of about $2 million a year. So at a proposed 10-year abatement, 5 years at 75% and 5 years at 50%, The district would collect that 20 million. We would give back 12 million. That would be the abatement to the developer, and the district would realize $7.9 million in improved revenue to the district over 10 years. So the note at the bottom there, just those calculations, presume a maximum of 10 years of abatement and not separate 10-year timelines for each one of those phases. So, any questions on that one?
What does it mean to be staggered over 10 years versus being?
They're doing like a 2024 development and then a 2029, so it would be a 10-year this is a 10 years from 2024 and not from like 2029 and adding extra years onto the abatement.
But we don't know what they're asking for.
Well, right now what they're asking for is they're asking for us to consider a 10-year abatement as well. Oh, hey, come on up. Okay.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Kate. Nice to meet you guys.
Hi.
Couple things to talk about. So this is, I deal with industrial in the entire Chicago market. I would not consider Montgomery, Illinois, what we call kind of a central node or something that people are jumping at to go to develop. For that reason, we are focused mostly on what's called a build-to-suit. So these are sites that we know the maximum FAR, meaning the maximum building size that we can build on a 200-acre site. We're going to the market to try to attract the best companies to come relocate to Montgomery, Illinois. And why I think that's important is that everyone knows that the economy is kind of dipping a little bit. It's critical, in our opinion, to be able to have some incentives in place to attract the best companies to relocate here. And we're competing with a lot of other sites across both the state of Illinois and also Indiana and Wisconsin that might have some better tax incentives than we have here in Illinois. That's our primary focus, and I just want to reiterate the other part is that the abatement doesn't go to the developer. We have nothing to do with it. This is going to be passed directly onto the tenant. So we're aligned in trying to get the goal of getting, a Fortune 100, a Fortune 200, to get some sort of replacement for a Caterpillar that went away. That's what we're trying to do here. The other piece of it is that the southern 100 acres, we are pretty confident we know who that's going to be. And then there's a couple other buildings that we're still talking through right now. Some of them could have a higher dollar amount as far as the build goes. One of the, which is a cold storage facility, which is a much higher dollar per square foot development transaction. So that's something that's going to impact you guys as well.
So this is not like, we're not building strip malls, basically, right?
No
like
strip
we're
malls.
looking for like warehouses and so forth.
Where distribution,
Got
which
it.
is kind of the benefit, right? And the benefit is that doesn't add a lot of load to the school district. It doesn't add a lot of seats to the classroom. It adds a huge diversification of your tax basis, right? These are not residential homes. This is, industrial.
Yeah, and the reason I ask is, I'd be very leery to say, okay, I'm going to put a strip mall here and give, a pizza place now an upper edge on pizza places. That's just an example. Nothing against pizza places. A disadvantage. So that would be my problem with this. But if you're telling me this is distribution warehouse type thing, then that puts a different look on things for me.
And the build-to-suit aspect, I think, is important too. There's, two main kind of abatement or incentive packages you can do. You can do a TIF, which is more beneficial to the developer, and you can do abatement, which is more beneficial to the actual company that you guys are going to have in your community, part of your activities, and kind of build. We've talked to the community college a lot about some sort of program to help students and interact with the community more than just a traditional kind of speculative industrial building where we don't know who's going to go in there. We're asking for a little bit of time so that we can go out and find the best for you guys and for us. So that's why we kind of wanted that phased approach as well, because if we kick it off, we're planning to start moving dirt this summer. So this is not 10 years in the future. This is like we're ready to go, and we would like to do that.
I don't know if Latanya's question was answered. The staggered on the abatement part.
So we have had some talks with the Village of Montgomery, and as they mentioned, they are the ones that have really, they've drafted an ordinance, and we're reviewing it with their attorneys. The southern 100 acres had a three very distinct phase build, and so we had asked originally that abatement starts by phase, so that they can capture the most of the 10 years. Because if they build a 500,000 square foot building in July, that's done by 2024, and they don't start their second phase until 2027, does that cut, is it the same 10-year clock? Because they haven't actually built that building. So that's why we asked for a little bit of leeway there. But I believe that how the village kind of took this, they gave us till 2026 to start. So anything from now until 2026, we get a little flexibility. The time starts when the building is complete, but outside of 2026, because if you guys are counting on revenue and you're asking us to help you get more revenue, we want to make sure that we do that now instead of 10 years from now.
So,
Go ahead.
No.
Who
You
makes,
know this.
who makes the final decision on the abatement agreement? Is that basically run by the village? Is it run by whoever's moving into the location, or?
I guess I don't understand the question.
So you've got two different proposals out here of abatement agreements.
Yes.
I would assume that overall there ends up just being one abatement agreement that everybody abides by?
You can do it two ways. I think Kendall County typically, from my experience, wants to do one ordinance that is similar, because simply from an administrative perspective, it's a lot to try to do different levels at different taxing bodies.
Sure.
And you guys have a lot of taxing bodies. So that's the first piece. And the second piece is we do have the ability, and that is totally within jurisdiction, I'll let you answer that, but that you can have different agreements with different taxing bodies.
Oh, yikes.
So, in my estimation, all abatement, regardless of when they start, will be done by 2036.
Yes.
Okay.
So how, did you by any chance work on, and it might not be an abatement, so I need correction on that first, but in D300 with the Sears campus, did you work on that one?
I did not.
Okay, so there were some issues with that, and I'm not totally sure, and it was abatement, if you know. But with the payout to the district, what does that look like? And then, such as Sears, when they then left Illinois and they are now not around, what does that look like? Let's say that happens in year 8 of the 10 years. How do we rely on this income, I guess, is what I'm asking.
I would suggest, if you're okay with it, that Dr. Petsky move on to a slide where I think that it's built into
Okay, thank
what he's
you.
going to say, and if it turns out that we don't, please say it again, and we'll make sure
Okay,
it's there.
thank you.
I do want to briefly note that I had an opportunity to speak with Kate outside, and that was the first that we knew that, or that I knew that there was an ordinance even being drafted yet. So I think there is some communication that we are trying to adjust through some of the transitions at the county and at the village. We have seen a number of recent abatement agreements from the county, and that's what Dr. Petsky spoke to earlier. Those had these clawback protections that you'll get to and that we think are important, so that you're not encouraging investment in properties that are significantly larger than anything else that you have, which also makes them more challenging to repurpose later.
Yes.
So I'll let you move on to the next part and address that.
All right, so just wanted to point out again, just real quickly, the community and district benefits, based on the estimates that were shared by the Village of Montgomery, the proposed projects show promising indicators of development-related investments in the community. Increase in EAV, investments in infrastructure and utilities. There's a large capital outlay for the facilities. There's some anticipated job creation and potential future site development. That's that build-to-suit area that we were talking about. And for us, that additional industrial EAV resulting in tax revenue for the school district and the other taxing bodies, that's not dependent on the residential building that we see a lot of.
So I'm assuming a lot of work has been done in the consideration for the 75 and 50. Is it in line? with what you would expect, given, you know, the issues facing, you know, this particular location, anything along those lines, or just kind of counting on you to?
Well, and I think a lot of the conversations we're having, kind of what I'm hearing the board saying is like, who's the ultimate authority? And the ultimate authority in this is the Village of Montgomery. So they're the ones who are going to decide the businesses that they bring in and how they bring those businesses in. And they, as I said earlier, I can see why they were in favor of the abatement at 75% for 5 years and 50% for the remaining 5 years. It's a large investment. But that's missing some of the details in the application process. So here I'll read through my administrative recommendation. Based on the value to the community and the tax revenue scenarios that we just showed you, you know, going from 64,000 to 7.9 million with the abatements in that scenario that were provided by the Village of Montgomery, school district administration understands why the Village of Montgomery publicly supported the 10-year abatement. And what we would recommend is that the administration recommends support for the commercial development. But we also make sure that that support is contingent upon the final abatement agreement, something for the board to take action on. And that includes the school district as a party, containing some adequate protections. Things like clawbacks that we were talking about, provisions described, and that actually comes from, the question was asked, where does that come from? That's through the county's abatement application. So Kendall County has that in there, including limitations on tax challenges, which would require additional discussions regarding minimum assessed values. That's kind of what happened with the Sears property, is they challenged the value of the taxes and was lowered, and the school district actually went to Springfield to argue against the lowering of that assessment. So that's something that we want to be proactive in.
Okay, thank you.
So we recommend that the administration recommends that we continue to focus on those protections, even if the Board of Education expresses support for different abatement durations, so the 10-year timeline, as well as different percentages. But I think it's important to note, again, the Village of Montgomery did vote on a 10-year, 75%, 50%, but that just gave them the ability to then negotiate the terms and the draft proposal, and that's what we'd be looking at as well.
Okay, now that I understand this a little better, so, I mean, maybe this is for Kate. I mean, the you know, the last couple bullet points here, those are pretty standard. This isn't going to be something that hinders anything?
I don't think so. When Brittany and I were talking about this, we had mentioned that the framework for the draft proposal with the tax considerations and those other contingencies, that's something that is addressed in the Kendall County application and something that we would expect to see. But with all of those kinds of I's dotted, T's crossed, applications filled out, and whatnot, would the board be interested in that type of an arrangement, a 10-year abatement at those percentages to attract the businesses to our area?
But we do bring up those protections specifically tonight because in some of the conversations it has become less clear whether that is in fact a deal breaker for the developer, and we don't know that, and that might be why you were directing the question to Kate. There are conditions and protections that we regularly recommend be included in these agreements. They're standard in the Kendall County application, and they are in the other agreements that Kendall County has entered into and shared in the background. You talked about whether these are standard amounts that are being requested. I believe it was an earlier slide that talks about the recent abatement agreements that were shared with us that were 3 years in length for the abatements that were being provided. One of them had an additional 3 years beyond that time where the property tax assessment protections continued. That's not to say that the board wouldn't still decide to support 10 years given the different magnitude of the project, but we share that just because that is the body of information in recent agreements in Kendall County.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the scale on this is much different, right? So.
Yes.
I was going to say, Dr. Petsky, Brittany, Kate, we thank you so much for the work that you've done on this. Dr. Petsky, you and I have had a lot of conversations for quite some time on this, and the board. You've asked a lot of great questions, a lot of the questions that he and I had talked about earlier. So, Dr. Petsky, what ultimately are you looking for from the board at this point in time?
I think just wanted to provide an update so we could kind of go on the record to say that the village is asking us to consider the same as them. 10-year, 75% for 5-year abatement, and a last 5 years of 50% abatement. And what I'm curious about is if there are other questions or information that the board would like to have from my office or from the Village of Montgomery or from the developer. One of the things that Brittany and I were talking about wanting to provide is, again, kind of that framework or a draft proposal for the board to act on. But is there anything else, like Dr. Sparlin said, I think some good questions were asked today. Is there anything else, is the board comfortable expressing a position on that abatement at this point? Or is there more information that's needed?
I'm comfortable expressing a stance with the provisions that you've had, but my question, I guess, is more procedural. It's under information, so are we really, I don't see on this agenda where we have this listed as a voting piece.
Yeah, no, this is not an action item, but
Okay.
if we were to bring this back for action, what other questions would the board
Got it.
have? What other information would you be interested in having? And are you comfortable expressing an opinion about it?
Just that your provisions are in there.
One other
Yep.
question.
Yep.
The second provision seems to give us liberty to discuss different percentages. And if I recall, the initial iteration of this, I think it may have been a 50-50 percentage. Is there a reason why it shifted, or is it, Kate gave some pretty clear, I mean, of course, I know we're trying to attract people, but I'm also thinking about the best interest of the district, so.
Yeah, and that's where Brittany was saying this has kind of evolved over time. We've been asked to look at several different iterations and different percentages, and it's kind of settling on that 10-year time frame because of the investment. One of the concerns was the reason it's longer than the other projects is it's that type of investment is going to take a longer period of time. But then the percentages are kind of settling in at that 75% for the first 5 years and then 50% for the last 5 years. That's where, like I said, the village showed support for that. They want to start negotiating that and putting some terms together. The district wants to bring forward some of the contingencies that we've been talking about, making sure that if we do take any action, we're very clear what we're entering into.
Yeah, I'm comfortable exactly as it is. I'm assuming, and I'm not assuming, I know that Montgomery, this is probably, if not their top priority, one of their top two, right? So they've done, I would have to.
I would assume if they could work out a better deal, they would, but
Right,
this
that's
is
kind of what
reasonable.
I'm saying, and the economic benefit, not just to the district, but to the entire community is, it's substantial, relatively speaking. So,
I would say I individually also am uncomfortable. I have one thing that's kind of lurking in my mind that I think is a separate topic but related, but something I think I think we should keep in mind is once we have tenants in place and they're in our community, how can they work with us in the education of our students? I'm thinking of logistics and internships and things like that for students. I know that's probably not parts of those discussions, but as we bring in industry, I think it's important to, yes, think about all these financial contributions, but also think about what they might offer or how we can work in partnership with them to enhance the educational experience of our students.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, are there any other questions? All right.
Are we coming back with the?
Yeah, like Dominic kind of inferred, this is a great project for the Village of Montgomery, so we'll be following them. We'll be having a conversation with them tomorrow and see what else they need from the school district. But I think the presentation today and the update, just kind of keeping the board informed on where they are with that and seeing what else we might need. So.
Okay. You know what, Dr. Petsky, I don't know if you answered this question, but what does the Village of Montgomery have a timeline that they're working on right now?
Not that I'm aware of. I think they were kind of waiting for us to kind of present more information to the board to kind of get a indication of our comfort level. Like I said, we're the biggest taxing body, so a lot of the dollars fall to us. They just want to make sure that we're supportive of that. And I think we are supportive, what I'm hearing, but we're also hearing that we want some contingencies to make sure that that there isn't an early withdrawal from that as well. So.
We're also waiting to see for all of these pieces to move forward. Kendall County, as far as we are aware, has not taken any action or stated a public position. We know that different administrators throughout transition have been actively watching. We don't know what has gone on behind the scenes, but we have not seen public action from them or Waubonsee Community College. So that would be other pieces once we're able to see what statements they have to make.
Thank you.
Hopefully they're just waiting for us.
Yeah.
Probably.
So, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Item 11.4 is renewal of our intergovernmental agreement with Valleys. Are there any questions on what the administration's presented?
So 11.4 is the intergovernmental agreement with Oswego Fire Department.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I apologize if there's any confusion. So this is a renewal of our current IGA. Oswego Fire provides emergency management services at our sophomore and varsity football games, all of our home games at both OE and OH. The language of the IGA has remained the same. The only thing that has changed is the hourly rate. We have had the same hourly rate for the last 2 years. It's a 1-year IGA with the ability to renew for an additional year. So for the last 2 school years, we have had the rate of $54. So this is the first time that we have seen an increase. The new increase will be $60 an hour for school year 24.
Are there any questions for Dr. Kincaid? All right.
So this will come for action at our next board.
All right. 12.1, action item, bills for payment. Can I have a motion, please?
Make a motion to authorize the payment of bills in the amount of $3,995,964.19 as presented.
Second.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Ms. Venmuth?
Aye.
Dr. Maria?
Aye.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Action item 12.2, adoption of all sections of the press policy manual. Would you like to have
Got
some?
to make the motion first.
Can I have a motion, please?
Make a motion to adopt the SD308 press policy manual with any changes as discussed.
Second.
I have a question about this one.
Yep.
So did we remove out of here the portion that talked about tax abatement if we were to, if Kendall County were to pass a sales tax, we had a policy that stated it would go towards abatement of property taxes. Did we remove that from this?
It is law. Law supersedes our school board policy. So there was, press said there was no reason for us to have it in our policy, and we aligned with press.
So hold on, you're saying that according to the state of Illinois, we cannot have that in our policy?
That's not what I said.
Okay, well, that's why I'm asking. So you said it's law.
The
So I'm
tax
trying to
abatement
clarify
is
that.
Like, us putting it on our policy would not affect that positively or negatively because it's automatic.
So automatically, it's going to go towards tax abatement?
Go towards tax abatement. I'm saying us having a policy on tax abatement in our policy manual is not going to change whatever the law determines.
So,
Jared, you're referring to the 1% countywide sales tax.
correct. Yeah. So, okay. So let me ask this: does the law dictate what we do with the money that comes in from the sales tax?
So currently.
It doesn't. So that's why we have the policy, right?
So currently, the policy that you're referring to is 4.25.
Right.
It is unique to our district
I understand.
from several years ago. In terms of what Board Member Johnson is talking about is the ability to pursue this tax abatement. We did not only talk to press, but also our board attorney, who recommended that we could remove it. In terms of what you're referring to, the spending of then, if this were to go through, the law allows us to potentially pursue the opportunities. The policy, even as it's written, it's a recommendation for potentially how to spend the money. It is not a, like, we must spend according to. Now, we are able to leave the policy in the manual. That would need to be part of the recommendation, but we are not required to have the policy in there.
Yeah, and I know that. Like, I know we're not required to have the policy in there, but I'm also aware of the historical piece behind this when this came up, and this, whether you want to have this discussion or not, I'm just going to reiterate, there are definitely people who pay attention to the fact that that policy's in there, and I think it sets the opposite precedent where people are going to take some of these policies more seriously when it comes to this issue. Listen, I have no problem with having the conversation if this ever comes to fruition, but I think it needs to happen then. So.
But the policy didn't even direct us to do something. It said we could. And so I think that at least where we landed, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Kincaid, was we didn't want people to believe that because it was in a policy, this is the way it would be done, because it was just a suggestion. We weren't using policy appropriately, if you will. So, and honestly, there were a couple of those instances. So we didn't want people to say, oh, well, it's in our policy manual. It has to happen.
When you say it has to happen, what do you mean it has to happen?
That we have to spend it in this particular way.
Well,
I think that, and I will speak if you feel this is in line with, we should be having those discussions every time it come up, not fall to a policy manual. And then all the policy manual is going to say it might, you can use it in this way.
Again, I have to pull historical context here, and we had this discussion, and we wanted to make this abundantly clear. This was the route that things would be taken. To take this off, hey, listen, I spend my life hoping I'm wrong, but you're leaving the door open for potentially something that could come down the road.
I definitely, I agree with you. We did have that discussion. I'm not saying that you're incorrect in that. I'm just saying from a legal perspective or a policy perspective, it was kind of, I don't want to use the word throwaway, but it's like it didn't matter here or there.
I don't have it in front of me. I'm sorry.
What?
Just clarify. State it again.
So what happened was when the decision was made to send this to the Kendall County Board, the Kendall County voters, on whether to pass a sales tax or not, there were many in the community that were skeptical of this because they felt like it was just another way for the school district to spend money. And of course, we know the conversations we've had when it comes to increasing the levy and other pieces, right? So what did garner support from some people inside our community, not saying it garnered any support outside of our community, but inside our community, was the fact that we wanted to show we were serious by putting in policy that the revenues that would come from that sales tax would directly help and go towards helping property tax relief, so property tax abatement. We knew we didn't have to do that at the time, but we did that because it was a way to try and show that we were serious and it was solidified in there. I have no problems with, if this ever came to fruition, that we would, have a discussion as a board. If I don't think it's going to happen during my time, but whatever board, right? But the problem is that what was told to the community is this is how serious we are about it, and now I think to take it away, it's going to, I guarantee it's going to leave a bad taste in some people's mouth.
See, I don't. This isn't coming up for a vote. So if it were to come up for a vote, how would that look? I mean, would that language be able to be put into the ballot, the language on the ballot?
You cannot put the language on the ballot, no.
And then can the board at that time decide to completely change that anyhow? So this isn't something that.
But yeah, you're right. But here's what the message is at that point is, well, we can just put it on, take it off as we please.
But we weren't using policy correctly in the first place.
Well, see, and this is where I disagree, because I would say that that's what the voters wanted, and so they wanted to see that we were serious, so we put it in the policy.
But can you understand that? I'm not disagreeing. I was one of those voters. But putting it in our policy manual, which doesn't have a lot of eyes on it, if you will, but putting it in our policy manual didn't make or break that the way that we spent the money. It just said we will discuss it, and it could be used in this potential way. So what I am worried about, and we saw this a lot throughout our policy manual, is that we misused what policy is. Policy making, policy approvals, and then, using that then to have discussions and say, oh, well, this is our policy. That is a procedure. That's a best practice. I don't even know what the right words are, but I just don't want people to think because it was in our manual, it changed the way that things were done. I get that it was serious. I was part of that. Like I wanted to know where that money was going. But it being in the policy manual didn't make us any more serious or not serious. That's all I'm trying to say from an education standpoint.
I get it. I'm going to disagree. I'm sorry, but I think it definitely sent a clear message, and it definitely was, heck, I just talked to somebody a few weeks ago that it matters. So I'm not going to tell anybody else how to vote by any stretch of the imagination, but I guarantee that it will draw attention.
I just want to, I want to be, did it read, I mean, not saying I don't believe Jen, but did it absolutely read that it can be used that way? Or is it, or did it say it will be, or shall? How it read.
Policy 425 states the goal of the board is to use 100% of all revenue received from that tax to pay principal and interest of outstanding capital purpose bonds with an equivalent amount abated from the bond and interest levy and extension. The law says that it has to go into your capital project fund. It does not go any deeper than that in saying how it should be used. So it was a goal statement in a policy.
So it was a can.
Yes.
Okay.
So it was a what?
A can. Can be used that
And
way,
it really,
not shall.
and to Jared's point, we wanted to say this is really important, this is our intention of using it, but nothing about putting it in the policy made them anybody do anything differently. I just want to make sure as a policy-making board that one of our main roles that we truly understand what policy is, what procedure is, what process is. And we found in this exercise that we just went through for a year that we misused policy. And so it could give community members, if they were to read it, the maybe false understanding of what was in there. If it's a law, and we have to follow the law.
Yeah,
and a goal is a goal. Sorry.
I think what I'm hearing is that Jared is 100% right, but what we can do, I don't know what precipitated the need to put that in the policy back then, but what I can say is whatever the situation was, I think what we can do now is that we can make decisions that gives the confidence to the community that we're going to be as, I'll use the words fiscally responsible as we can with not only how we use the money as well as paying down the additional debt. And I understand you're saying this was an indicator to them that we were serious. And so I would say, what other indicators can we give that we're serious without misusing policy?
And to clarify, since this policy was adopted, the law itself has been amended, and they've expanded what you can use that money for. If you were to get that sales tax revenue, you could seek a resolution saying it would also could be used for school resource officers and mental health purposes in the schools. So it has expanded.
So that's actually backing my argument up, which is if you start changing this stuff, like I guarantee people are going to change. They're going to pay attention, and I understand like the policy piece, but you know, and I'm like 99% of the time I'm like, hey, listen, what's press telling us, all that, but you know, I'm sorry, there's a historical piece here, and hey, listen, I hope I'm wrong, right? So,
And I think that if we were to ever pursue that again, we can create either the same goal or another goal, or that board at that time. I don't know. It seems like a can in policy. I don't know.
We worked very hard as a team, as a multidisciplinary team, to make sure that we used policy appropriately, procedure appropriately, assign accountability for, you know, where those things belong. I think there is a leap of faith. I'm not going to disagree with Jared, and I think the other indicators of that are transparency in our finances, continuing to dig in our bill pays and in our financial statements, and to ask for, you know, representations of where we're spending what money and how. I think that this board, particularly the veteran members on this board, have worked very hard to do that. You've been a part of that, you know, asking for financial statements that reflect and connect the dots better, and, you know, hopefully tying board goals to finances. Something we've been trying to do for a long time. Those are the best indicators of, are we putting our money where our mouth is? A policy that says can is just a policy that says can, you know. So honestly, we can put it back in, but I just want to be very crystal clear that it doesn't have any legal effects on it, or I don't even know that legal is the right word as much of it. It doesn't tell the board they have to do something particular.
So is there a detriment to putting it back in? Sorry, Jared.
Not really.
And again,
Jared has, you have a passion for this one. And
listen. Hey, listen. I hope I'm wrong. Like, right? Like, if I'm in the lesser of the camps, I hope I'm 100% wrong and there's no ramifications. But I will say, I mean, it clearly states in policy that that's your goal, then you're sending a very clear message to your community, and that's what the community needed at the time.
So I'll say one last thing. If we put that in there as our goal, and then we look at the financial report and look at our debt service, and we see that we have exceeded the schedule, and we've refinanced, and we've paid down our debt significantly, and we look at that schedule, and that's the indicator of for how what we're doing and we're not even thinking about that goal. Whether that goal is there or not, people are looking at the goal, but look at our debt service and look at how fast we've paid it down. That's the indicator of success for that according to that goal, but the policy.
A goal doesn't belong in
I
policy,
thought the goal
though.
was to abate the money, right?
Yes.
That's different.
So
giving it back to, so we're getting people coming in from DuPage County, they're spending the money in Kendall County, and we're going to give it back
Southern
to our
DeKalb, Northern LaSalle, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, you get what I'm saying. Yeah. So it was actually kind of to try to reduce the tax burden on Kendall County taxpayers.
Okay,
but
so
people didn't.
let's just make sure, if what do we want to do? Do we want to put it back in?
No,
or
we're
have a motion
voting.
Well, we can
voting.
amend stuff, right?
I know, we
Well,
put a
there's a
motion.
motion on the table,
Yeah,
so
there
we have
is,
to vote
either-
on the motion.
Yep.
Got to vote on it.
Jared
Well,
can
there
vote
could
no.
be, not to complicate it, but if you wanted to make a motion to add policy 425 back in and see where that motion goes, that would be a secondary motion that you could then vote on and then go back to then you'd know you're voting with or without it.
You know, I'm gonna let somebody else decide on that, because my only concern is that that's not the only thing that we're overlooking. So, if somebody else wants to do that, I'll obviously support it and I'll go along with it.
With all due respect, there was a committee that looked through the most comprehensive review, line by line, of the policy manual. I know your job is to review it and approve it, but I want to just make this statement. We have multiple reasons that our team worked very hard and around the clock to get this policy manual built so that it could be approved by July 1st. Faith's law goes into effect on July 1st. We have to make those decisions tonight. So whether we put it in or not is not the most important thing on the table tonight.
Yeah, there's a lot more to.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I'm calling for a vote. Ursula?
Ms. Venmuth?
Wait, we're just voting on the original motion.
Yep.
Yeah.
Voting on.
To
the
approve
original.
all sections. Remember, we already approved the section 7 student services.
Are we on
at the last
discussion or
board
vote?
meeting.
Are we on discussion or vote?
Vote.
Okay.
But Ms. Winmuth
Ms.
needed
Venmuth?
clarification.
Aye.
Did she?
Dr. Maria?
Aye.
Mr. Cerrone?
I
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
No.
Motion passes 6-1. Action item 12.3, approval of resolution for release of land cash funds. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the resolution to request the Kendall County Land Cash Funds.
Second.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Venmuth?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Dr. Maria?
Aye.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Action item 12.4, approval of intergovernmental agreement with PASEC. Can I have a motion, please?
Make a motion to approve the intergovernmental agreement with Plano Area Special Education Cooperative.
Second.
Dr. Maria?
Aye.
Ms. Venmuth?
Aye.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Action item 12.5, approval of new mass communication tool. Can I have a motion, please?
Make a motion to approve the 5-year contract with Catapult K through 12 as the district's provider for website content management system, emergency management, mass communications, and branded district app.
Second.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
No.
Dr. Maria?
Aye.
Ms. Venmuth?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1. Action item 12.6, approval of building administrator contracts. Can I have a motion, please?
Make a motion to approve the building administrator contracts as presented.
Second.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Ms. Venmuth?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Dr. Maria?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
I'm abstain.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Motion passes 6 with 1 abstention. 12.7, action item, approval of district administrator contracts.
Make a motion to approve the district administrator contract as presented.
Second.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Abstain.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Venmuth?
Aye.
Dr. Maria?
Aye.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye. Motion passes 6 with 1 abstention. 12.8, action item, approval of personnel report. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
Second.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Ms. Venmuth?
Aye.
Dr. Maria?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Action item 13.1, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?